This screencast is to support this lesson, which is taken from Cutting Edge Elementary, and that is by S. Cunningham, P. Moore, and A. Crace, C-R-A-C-E, and published by Pearson. This is Unit 9, and the focus is on superlative adjectives, as I said. So you've got these student pages. There are 2 of those, and you're going to need a couple of other things. Here's a section from the back of the back of the student's book rather, and it's got some grammar reference and also some controlled practice. So there are a couple of pages of it. So study 1 covers comparative adjectives and study 2 the superlatives, which is what we're focusing on. So that's a very useful resource as well for additional controlled practice activities. And here are the teacher's book notes. It's for the whole unit, so you'll need to scroll down to Grammar Focus 2, Superlative Adjectives, page 80. Also here at the very end of this document, you will find the answers to the controlled practice exercises that I just showed you from the back of the student's book. I'm sure you can work out those answers for yourself, but in case you wanted to double check, then they're at the end of this document. As usual, I take an overview of the whole piece of material first to see if anything's missing, see if I need to gather anything from anywhere else. I can see that there's a reading which has examples of the superlative adjectives in it, which will act as a context for the grammar. And here's a grammar task for the students to do. Don't get confused by these red boxes. They are there as student tasks, not just as information for the students or information for the teacher. Then we've got some practice here. I'm thinking that these facts in the quiz are going to be a bit out of date, but the activity itself looks nice, so I could adapt that. Or, of course, I could find more controlled practice in the material at the back of the student's book that I just showed you, the other document. And also I can see here some personalised practice coming in at the end. So I think we're okay. We might not need to look anywhere else for any other material. So the first part is a reading. And remember, if you're teaching receptive skills, there's a procedure to follow. You want to raise interest and background knowledge first, possibly pre-teach any blocking vocabulary, maximum of 6 words, and then move into an easy task to start with, and then a more difficult task, and then hopefully a bit of speaking to follow up as well. So those are the stages to move through for receptive skills. I think what's here on the page is very nice. The book suggests also perhaps starting off with some questions about shopping. So maybe you could start off with a few questions on a slide. Do you like shopping? Do you like shopping alone or with other people? You've got some other questions coming up later, so don't cross over those, but perhaps getting some interest going on shopping. Then I think move into the material here. We're looking at department stores. So these are good ones to focus on, and we need this one because it's for the reading. But you've also might have department stores in your country. So maybe we are in Bristol, so perhaps a picture of, I don't know, House of Fraser or something like that could be useful too. So you want to elicit the idea of a department store, basically, and say, do you know these ones? Do you know where they are? 1A, just to get some ideas going. Then we want them to read. And the initial question is, why is it famous? So set the question. You're going to read about this one. Identify the picture. I don't know how you say it, so you're going to have to work out some form of pronunciation. You can work on Shinsuke, something like that. And then they read to see why it is famous. Okay. So if you wanted to do some pre-teaching of vocabulary before that, then that could be useful. Read through the text and choose maximum of 6 words that you might want to pre-teach. Then it might be a good idea to produce a matching task. So words down one side, definitions or pictures down the other side, and they match them together. Now with a reading task, you can pre-teach the vocabulary before they read at all, or you can do it after the initial reading task for gist. So you can decide it's either going to go here before they read or here after they've done the first task. Then moving on to number 2, obviously you're going to do a peer check and then check the answers together. Have the text on a slide so that you can point out where the answers are if the students have struggled. And even if they haven't, point out where the answers are in the text. Number 2, check pronunciation of the numbers first. They can be very tricky things to say. And just as a pointer here, 14, where's the stress? It's on the teen, isn't it? Whereas that can be very easily confused with the pronunciation of 40, 40, 40, where the stress is on the first part. So I think that's an interesting point to point out for students. Then they look for the answers in the text, and afterwards peer check, and then check as a group, making sure the answers are visual and that the students know where in the text the answers are. Okay, and then as a follow-up, there's some questions here, or if you want to adapt these a little bit, you might say, I might have a picture of a market and a small shop and a department store and say, which do you prefer? And that way you would add markets as well into the idea of small shops, large department stores and markets, because a lot of our students also would go to markets as well. So here's the grammar section, and we want the students to be as involved as possible. The teacher's book notes suggests putting these sentences on the board or on a slide and then trying to elicit from the students what goes in the 2 gaps. And then it simply says, check they understand the meaning of superlative adjectives. All right, so you're going to need to think about how you're going to do that. Superlatives are for when we have more than 2 things being discussed. Okay, so that's important. So 3 or more nouns. And obviously it refers to the top end or the lower end of that. But that can get very explainy. So visuals are usually a great way to go. I did a quick search on the internet and came up with quite a few things. I'll give you a quick look at. Here you go. So a quick Google search of superlative adjective meaning and a focus on images throws up a lot of images that you could use. None of them are particularly about shopping, which is a bit of a shame, but we're trying to get the meaning across. If you can do it within the shopping context, then that's all well and good. And if you can use biggest and most expensive, then that's great, because those are the 2 examples that you've just elicited from the students. So you can see these kind of pictures are really useful in order to get across the idea that it's more than 2 things and that it's the extreme end. So up here as the biggest or down here as the smallest. Okay, so clarify the meaning of the general meaning of superlative adjectives for the students. If I'm in a classroom, I usually get the students to make a lineup of from shortest to tallest, and then we can work in a very visual way there, or who has the biggest family or who lives furthest from the school, and get them physically lining up. And then elicit the examples from there. So that's a great way to do it if you can be face to face. So then we need to focus on form. The teacher's book notes are pretty good on this. Okay, so I'll let you read that. Obviously, we could work through this with the students. I think it would be nicer to do maybe a couple of examples and then let them do the others themselves. And of course, then we can go back to showing them the text where the examples come from. All right, so have a look at the teacher's book notes for that. I think it's nice to end up with some kind of chart. So we'll look back at the grammar reference. Do you see the chart here? It's very nice, and I think it creates a really useful document for the students. So perhaps at the end, when you've gone through the task in the red box, then have this up on the screen, perhaps with a couple of gaps, so that the students have still got something to do. And this would produce a really useful document for the students to have. You could put it in the chat, and then they could save it as a copy of the rules. And equally, they could have this then when they're doing the control practice to come. One point here on the trickiest bit to sort of get across is here where we double the consonants. I think you've got to decide what the level of your students is and whether they can cope with this rule or not. If they're a bit stronger, then I think it's fine. And if they're a bit weaker, then I think I would just say with bigger, we double the G because that's the most common one. Okay, but it's a useful rule for you to get your head around. So we've dealt with meaning there, and we've dealt with form. So obviously pronunciation it is important too. So I think you can decide where you're going to bring that in. You could bring it in before you start doing the practice stage, drill some of the sentences from the grammar presentation, making sure that you're clear about the, and the end of the word is not est, it's ist. So those two things can be the main things to focus on. Or if you wanted to do it later on, you think, oh gosh, it's getting a bit teacher-centered, I need to break this up, then you could drill some sentences later on. So maybe after they've done the quiz, you could drill the fastest car in the world, or how much does the most expensive handbag in the world cost. So you could drill later on if you want. I think this activity is great. But it's out of date, as I said. So you could change that. You could even make it more relevant to the city that your students might be in or the countries that they are from. But I think it should be relatively easy to update the information here. Let them complete the superlatives first, and this is where it's useful for them to make reference to the chart of rules, and then check those answers. I don't think you need to use an audio for this. You could just do it yourselves. And then they can work in pairs and actually do the quiz, choose the right answers. And then again, I think you can check the answers with them rather than listen and check. Maximize the interaction during these stages. Get the students into breakout rooms, get the students into pairs to peer check. Really think about how you can get as much pair work or group work into this task. If you're looking for some more control practice, there's some back in that grammar reference control practice document from the back of the book. There's some nice control practice there. Also, I've just gone onto WordWall and just looked in the community section and put in superlative adjectives. This is where things have been made by other people but are publicly available. This might be something nice for you to use as inspiration and make your own word wall activity, or you could even use one of these. You might think that that's a bit more interesting to add a bit of variation. I do like these word ordering and jumbles. They're really nice. But there's a lot of nice activities here. So if you're looking for variety, have a look on WordWall. And at this point, we need something freer or something something personalised. I think 3A and 3B work nicely together. So it needs a clear model to set up writing the 5 questions and then check those questions. So students working individually to write their 5 questions. You could check a few of those afterwards, and then get them into groups, into pairs, in breakout rooms, and get them asking and answering the questions. Okay, that'll need a nice clear demonstration with a strong student before you put them into the breakout rooms. All right, monitor the breakout rooms and then some feedback on ideas when you come back together. What did you learn about your partner? Something like that. And then some focus on accuracy and examples of good language use at the end. It's a nice lesson for the students. I think they'll enjoy it.